to my colleagues at the Ontario Principals Council and the associations they work with around the world. I wanted to talk about up-to-date what we're focusing on in late 2015. There are four things I wanted, and they're all integrated. One is the role of the school principal, school leaders. Second is professional capital. Third is some exciting new work on what we call new pedagogies for deep learning. And the fourth is stepping back from the strategy, which we call leading from the middle, why that's important and why it fits in the reforms for whole system change that we're working on. And we work on these days, just without going into huge detail, we work, when I say we, there's a group, maybe 10 or 12 of us, capacity building, whole system change, focus on pedagogy, link it to leadership across the levels, get results that you can measure on impact, not just literacy, but also some of the new deeper learning ones, which they call the 6 C's, the critical thinking, citizenship, character education, and so forth. So we've done this in Ontario, as many of you know, built up over the last 12 years, very strong capacity across the 4,900 schools, 4,000 elementary, 900 secondary schools, 72 districts. We're working massively, is the only word for it, in California, 1,009 districts, 43 million people, same size as all of Canada, and where we're working at the level of the governor and the state superintendent, so the macro level. We're working with not only individual districts, but consortia of districts, working together 6, 10, 12 districts at a time, and at the individual school and district level. So it's a whole system change. And similarly, we're working in California, almost the flip side of, similarly, we're working in New Zealand, almost the flip side of California, 2,500 schools across the whole country, schools that have been working autonomously for quite a few years. And now the new policy and the new strategy is to say, how can they work in networks of schools focused again on instruction and on impact on student achievement? These networks typically are between 6 and 12 schools. So we're working to both conceptualize and strategize that, but also to help implement it, assess it, and draw further lessons. So the first thing, the principle. I wrote a book called The Principle, 3 Keys for Maximizing Impact. And I wrote it because there was a certain movement, especially in the US, to go deeper into instructional leadership, but it was being taken too literally. That is, the focus was on the principal, going into lots of classrooms, being supervised by the district, and it got a little bit like micromanagement, too mechanical. It alienated teachers and principals. So what I did was say, well, really, what does research say? What does practice say to this effect? And Vivian Robinson, a great researcher from the University of Auckland in New Zealand, did the best evidence synthesis, reviewing research around the world, and she found that 4 or 5 things, some of which were predictable about the role of the principal in terms of his or her effectiveness across the whole school, student achievement. So the predictable ones, work with teachers for goals and vision, setting the direction. Okay, we know that. Secondly, get resources, time and other kinds of material resources for teachers to work on. That's also understandable. But there was one factor out of 4 or 5 that was twice as powerful in effect sizes as the other 4. And that was this: the degree to which the principal participates as a learner. That is the key phrase, participates as a learner, along with teachers in moving the schools forward. So we have a lot of video clips on this. You can go to michaelfullan.ca downtown on our YouTube channel. You can download what we're finding, 10-minute clips for quite a few schools. And the principal is lead learner. So when I say 3 keys, number 1, and this is the most important for sure, is being a lead learner means that you participate as a learner. You don't necessarily direct or chair everything. In fact, you don't. But you are there and you're shaping it and you're developing leadership in others and you're influencing the agenda. So you influence the student achievement agenda indirectly, but nonetheless explicitly. That is, it's really explicit about the school being successful. So that's one. The second one is we call system leader, a bit of an odd term, but this is very clear and very powerful, which is when you're working as a school principal, not only are you responsible for your own school, but you should be contributing to something bigger and wider than. Maybe it's the district, maybe it's a network with a few other schools, but you commit yourself to contributing to others and you learn from others. I call it systemness, not a real word, but a real concept. And when a lot of people pay attention to improving the system, then it benefits everybody, it benefits themselves. So this is system leaders, not mean you're at the top of the system, it means you're inside the system doing this good work. And the third key that I wrote about in that book is skills, competencies, change agent skills. And change agent skills in this respect are how do you lead the change process? And we have found, and I'll just give it to you in a kind of a simple form, we have found that effective leaders, change leaders, do this. They help the group shape and reshape quality ideas as they build capacity and ownership. There's a lot of sophistication in that statement. There's only two things. One is innovative ideas, good ideas, shape and reshape. But the other is capacity building and ownership. And if you have one without the other, you don't have much. So if you have good ideas, but you don't have a process where people are getting better, it goes nowhere. If you focus on capacity, but are not serious about what are the priority goals and how do we be specific about them, you also don't get very far. So these three keys of lead learner, system player, lead change agent, or skilled change agent are really, as I said in the book, and as I give many examples, that's where the power is. School leadership, being that effective, working with other schools as well as working with the district, if that's your system, and developing leadership in others. So that's one of four concepts. The second one is the work that Andy Hargraves and I did on the professional capital of teachers. This reinforces the lead learner, but it gives more depth, more framework to it. There are three capitals: human capital, social capital, and decisional capital. So human capital, the quality of the individual; social capital, the quality of the group; and decisional capital, the evidence-based, the quality in which there's an evidence-based culture that people draw on individually and collectively to make decisions. Most people think automatically of human capital because if you get better people, that's going to be good for the system. That's not the most powerful strategy. You can invest in getting different individuals in the system, but if you don't change the culture, which is social capital, the individuals will get eaten up by the culture every time. So while it's deceptive, then when economists go for human capital, but we found that social capital is the most powerful, and that's the part we want to have as the center of gravity to incorporate the other two. So a good example, the research is very clear actually over 40 years that we and others have done on collaborative cultures, focus, getting results. But if we take the business professor, Carrie Liana, she's been studying collaborative cultures and actually social capital, she calls it, over the last decade. And she'll typically measure three things: human capital, what are the qualities on paper of the competencies and qualifications of the teachers in a given school; and then social capital, questions like this: to what extent do you and other teachers in this school work in a focused, collaborative way to get results? If a lot of teachers say, yes, that's the way we work here, she'll say, this is a school with high social capital. And then the third thing she measured, we'll come to decisional capital in a few minutes, but third thing she measured was the extent to which there was an improvement in math over the course of a school year. And you can see where I'm going with this. She found, yes, those individual teachers that had higher human capital did well, but by far the schools that did best had strong social capital. That the school, because of, you can see why that would be the case, and she even found that teachers with lower human capital who happened to be in a school with higher social capital also got better in terms of results with math. So this is very powerful. What it means is that you want to invest in building the social capital, which is very specific. It's focused on the work. It's teachers getting better at what they're doing. It's well led by the school principal, which goes back to the first point, integrating that. And it really zeroes in on student achievement for that group of students and those teachers. And when you do that, you get results because social capital improves individuals. Individuals improve, if they're better, improve the quality of the group. And then when the group gets good, they start to attract good people who want to come and work with them, and that people who really are being effective want to stay. So there's a kind of virtuous circle in doing that. It's not enough, though, however, to give social capital, because if teachers are learning each other's methods, and those methods aren't the latest, It will be social capital, but it won't be as strong as it needs to be. So for that reason, we have incorporated decisional capital, which is the extent to which there's to use John Hattie's term, an evidence-based culture that's developed around the impact on student learning, and then tracing it back to changing what you do to get better impact. And so when you put these three things together, social, surrounded by human, and decisional capital, you get big results. And again, we built this into our work in all three places I mentioned, in Ontario, in California, and New Zealand. So that's those two things go together. But in terms of the substance of the change, I guess, I'll say the degree of depth of learning. There's a new phenomenon, and we're very much part of that. We call it new pedagogies for deep learning. You can look it up, ndpl.global. So ndpl.global. And new pedagogies are the new learning relationship between students and teachers, and among students and teachers and families. Much more active involvement on students, much more linking to how students work together, going deep into the kind of the pedagogical and learning and development of learning initiatives that they work together, and incorporating the family as well, which is complicated, but is furthered when it starts to attract the interest of students more. Families are more supportive, more interested. So this is the reason that this is happening, incidentally, is that traditional schooling is boring. You can see the data is very clear. As you go up the grade levels, the engagement of students goes down. So it starts, kindergarten, 95%. By the time you get to grade 9, it's about 36%. So there's in almost several studies, they show about only a third of the students are engaged by the time you get to high school or into high school. So this is, and one of our principals said, well, teachers were bored as well as students, but they didn't know it as much until we got into the new things. So we are doing the new pedagogies. I'll come back to the focus of that, the content of that, but we're also linking it to deep learning. And the deep learning are the so-called 21st century skills, but adding more the full student. And we call it the 6 C's. So there are character education, citizenship, collaboration, communication, creativity, and critical thinking. And we have rubrics and measures for all of these. And what's exciting about this, it's a living laboratory. We are working towards the following goal: having clusters, 10 clusters of 100 schools from 10 different countries, so 1,000 schools, who would be working on this because they wanted to, and we would be pulling it out and feeding it back and capturing it and doing this, which you can do now with the new technologies. So we have actually 7, so we have about 700 schools, and they are really, the attraction to this is it's intrinsically interesting to do this, and people, it's almost like wildfire, I'll say. And what you have to worry about is people go off in all kinds of directions without a framework. So that's why we have rubrics or tools, not to constrain people, but to help them focus. And then we pull out, and the flow of change is something like directional vision. So that's one of 3, directional vision. Secondly is letting go a little bit in the sense that innovation, let's be transparent about it. And then reining in on the cycle to say, what are we learning? And it's a faster iterative cycle than I just described, but what it does, and we have a lot of examples of this now, is it starts to, the engagement and the examples of what this looks like in the learning that's going on and our ability to capture. And this still requires whole system change. So it is about the learning outcomes, better, different learning outcomes. It is about new pedagogy, partnerships. It is about the culture of the school, that getting back to school leadership. It is about the infrastructure, both policies and support, and how that would happen and how you can develop it. So this is an extension, a natural extension of our other work, but it's going deeper into innovation. It's getting better results, more exciting results, and it's just at the early stage, so I don't want to overclaim here, but it is really, kind of the immediate future, and it's happening rapidly, and it's a transformation of learning. Finally, there's a new concept we have called leadership from the middle, and it's based on the following set of assumptions. Top-down change doesn't work because people won't do what they're told, and the top can't get it right. Bottom-up change, individual autonomy of schools, also doesn't work because it's too desultory. You have some work and some don't, but there's nothing coalescing, causing it to go forward. So if top-down change doesn't work and bottom-up change doesn't work, where's the glue? Where's the coherence? And we think it's in the middle. The middle can be defined differently depending on how many layers you have, but let's take typical North American layer: state level, district level, school level. So the middle are the district level, and we're getting districts now to strengthen themselves and to work in consortium districts. So the middle becomes more of a leverage for change. They don't do it in isolation, but what they do is they have more of a role to play. And then if they do it well, they get better results because of strengthening of the middle. And then they become better partners upward to the state, because now they're doing good work, in a sense, for the state, with the state. And so states like Ontario and like New Zealand as a country, and like California at the governor and state superintendent level, they recognize and value leadership from the middle because it's doing the work of whole system change, and they reinforce it. So these new partnerships are really quite phenomenal and have huge potential because they can mobilize very large numbers of people into the process of change that we're talking about and get results on a scale we haven't seen before. So these four things are integrated. Great new work on the role of the school leader and the leadership and developing leadership in the short run, as well as sustainability through developing leadership in others. The professional capital framework to make sure we're not just focusing on a part of it, but we're really mobilizing the whole system. The new pedagogies for deep learning, which is about innovation, but going deeper and getting better results. And then the leadership from the middle, which kind of integrates this whole system work. So this is all, finally, what I want to say is all of this work for me, for us, is about doing. It is practice leading to theory rather than the other way around. There's an action bias, but it's a focus bias. And when you build it from the doing part and you link it to results, and then you learn and then you get better, the knowledge certainly gets better, the research, the practical knowledge, but also the fact that people have to act is something that people get into and they learn and then they reinforce it and it spreads. So this is a whole set of things that are really different than they've been before. We really have a chance of mobilizing all levels, of accomplishing something we haven't accomplished before. There are great things going on. There are certain barriers in terms of wrong assessment systems of what I've called the wrong drivers before, policy drivers that don't work, like negative accountability, use of technology without it being steeped in pedagogy, the individual focus rather than team focus, ad hoc policies or overloaded policies. But now I think we have a good handle, and we're working to solve these with practitioners around the world, and it is, to me, much more productive than it's ever been. So I wish you well in your work. Thanks very much.